But to black America, let me make this statement. Everyone who is white is not racist. Thank you very much, Mr. Smith. And it's important to point out that because with this particular incident, it was warranted. But that doesn't mean we turn around in the second somebody disagrees with us of a different hue, pigmentation, culture, etc. The second somebody might be oblivious or ignorant to what we are, what we believe, what we feel, doesn't make them racist. Just like folks have an obligation to get whatever racist tendencies may be inside their bones, we have an obligation to appreciate there are a lot of people in this God-fearing country that we live in who are not racist. I'll read you the demand list. You won't believe the Missouri protest. It's right out of the 1960s, the same garbage that Huey Newton and the Black Panthers imposed upon America and got nowhere. It led them nowhere. It's a dead end. It got them nowhere. When I read you the list of demands issued to the university by the subliterates, you'll see that we've gone back 50 years as a result of the president's, I would say, very subtle racism that he has provoked in this nation. And I say again, if these football players are so sensitive to issues, I ask you, don't you think the university should have said to them, we are addressing these issues, but if you continue to protest and you continue to sit in or whatever you're going to do, we're going to dismiss you from the university until you come back. This is not about you. This is about us. We run the university, not you. Football players are not known for their brains. Let's be clear. They're known for their brawn. Why in the world would an entire university kowtow to a group of athletes who are not known for their brains when it is supposed to be an institution of higher learning, not football playing? What group is this now? It's racial turmoil. Oh, Concerned Student 1950. And they issued the demands to the university last month. 1. We demand that the University of Missouri System President Tim Wolf writes a handwritten apology to the Concerned Student 1950 demonstrators and holds a press conference in the Mizzou Student Center reading a letter. This is right out of Communist China, by the way, where they forced people who were not compliant with communism to admit wrongdoing and stand and be ashamed in the streets. This is straight out communism. It's a disaster. In the letter and at the press conference, they say, Tim Wolf must acknowledge his white male privilege, recognize the systems of oppression exist, and provide a verbal commitment to fulfilling Concerned Student 1950 demands. We want Tim Wolf to admit to his gross negligence, allowing his driver to hit one of the demonstrators, yeah, right, consenting to the physical violence of bystanders, and lastly, refusing to intervene when Columbia Police Department used excessive force with demonstrators. All right, I don't even want to read anymore. You get the picture. You get the picture. The thugs are now running the university. Period. End of story. I'm sick of it. I'm sick of it because I put up with this my whole life. How do you feel about that? Do you feel that these football players did the right thing by forcing a university president out? Or do you feel, as I do, that they should have been told that they will be thrown out of the university if they don't, well, let's say, do their job? It's that simple. If you don't do your job, or you want to protest, good for you. We live in a free country. But you don't demand that the president resign, do you? What did he have to do with their complaints? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. How do you feel about this? Now, there's another topic that I think is far more serious than that, which was the ISIS issue, as I read to you in Government Zero, and I hope you'll pay attention and sort of not lose the big picture, the big game. The big game is the big war. The big game is the war against Islamofascism that they have inflicted upon us. The big game out there is the one that Russia is fighting and that Obama is feigning. That's the big war. But we'll talk about the little wars here in America conducted by the illegitimate radical left in order to, A, weaken us and B, distract us from the real enemies, not only within but without. There is a dance of death in the West and actual death in the Middle East, courtesy of the Islamofascists. Meanwhile, the Caesar in the White House entertains himself with 1,000 sycophants, partying on behind closed doors, as if the Islamofascist hand will not touch him. He thinks he's protected from this new plague, the Black Death of radical Islam. But we're facing something the West hasn't had to deal with since the wars of religion in the 16th and 17th centuries. You see, when those religious wars ended in one place, they began in another, and they lasted for over 100 years. The same thing is happening right now. The radical Muslims are on the warpath, and they are against everyone else. They are against Muslims who are not as fanatical. They are against the members of all other religions. They think they are going to take us back to some pristine religious period in human history that never actually occurred. It's all complete garbage. These faith warriors live lower than the pigs they despise. They kidnap and rape 8-year-old girls and say the Quran authorizes it. They're not purists. They're killers. They're psychopathic Nazis in headscarves. They aren't leading a religious revival. They're trying to take us back to a state of barbarism that has been extinct for 1,200 years. This is a barbaric revolution, and we have a man in the White House who denies its existence. But whether he chooses to acknowledge it or not, it's going to continue until someone puts a stop to it, and let us hope that that is Vladimir Putin of Russia, who even Dianne Feinstein says we must cooperate with. Can you imagine that we have such a fool in the White House? That even a liberal senator from California has to say, hey, wait a minute, this is serious business here. It's been said that the fight against radical Islam is the defining conflict of the next generation. He likened radical Islam to a starfish. When you cut off a spider's head, it dies. But when you cut off the leg of a starfish, the starfish can regenerate it. Radical political Islam is a starfish. If you defeat ISIS or Al-Qaeda, they will merely come back under another name. Why would any government bring in unvetted Muslim immigrants at a time like this? It would seem that only an insane prince would do this to his own country. But Obama is not insane. He's stoned on the orthodoxy of the progressive left. Obama and his supporters are drunk on their ideology. They think they're going to create a progressive utopia by continuing their attack on all Western values. This is precisely how great civilizations of the past declined and eventually fell. They rejected the values that made them great and degenerated into narcissism and selfishness. They kept on partying until they were too weak to defend themselves. Then the unthinkable happened. They fell. That's the opening page to Government Zero. Now you know why it's a bestseller. It's the most important book of our generation. I'll be right back.
Join the Savage Nation. Call now. 855-400-SAVAGE. 855-400-7282. Savage.
The Savage Nation is sponsored by Swiss America, the only company I trust with my financial future. Call 800-289-2646 or Swiss. I wanted to talk about this topic. Listen to the story. California unveiled a new method for executing prisoners Friday, proposing a humane and dignified single drug injection protocol that could restart capital punishment after a nearly 10-year hiatus. We all know what the psychotics in the ACLU have done to our prisons and to the death penalty in particular. And you see, this regimen would replace a 3-chemical method that the state used to kill in the past. But that mixture was struck down in 2006 by a liberal whack job judge who said it could cause inhumane suffering if one of the drugs failed to work. That was such an outrage to the little girls who have been killed, the women who have been raped, the people who had their heads chopped off with axes by these murderers on death row. And so listen to this. You're never going to believe this story. They filed a lawsuit against the state of California, that is the crime victims' families, who favored the death penalty. They did turnaround. Turnabout is fair play. They hung the state by their own petard. They copied the ACLU. They sued the state, and they said, we're going to sue you because you're not invoking the death penalty. You're not following the law, as a matter of fact. We want it enforced. And so they helped develop a single drug protocol. And a settlement of this lawsuit brought by the Criminal Justice Legal Foundation has forced the state of California to devise a new lethal injection method by this month. However, it's not all good news, because the vermin in the ACLU are going to make sure that even this takes years before they are finally meeting their justice. Now, here's the question for the Savage Nation, but it's one that's worth talking about in our nation today. And that is, are you for or against the death penalty, and why? Now, I've heard the liberal argument, the type that Bernie Sanders style type of personality would have given, which is, it's better that 99 guilty men go free than one innocent man be punished. I've heard that since I was a child from the communists in the Bronx and Brooklyn and Queens. It's better that 99 guilty people go free than one innocent. You've heard the story. Well, that insanity has led to this rampant insanity of ISIS. for example? Would you rather have 99 of them go free than one of the innocent ISIS members be executed? No, of course not. So what are the arguments for the death penalty that I have? Well, they're very simple. It's a great deterrent. Not only is it not enacted often enough, but anyone who commits a violent crime of this nature understands that they're going to have 30 years of the greatest attention ever imagined by a prisoner in the history of the world.
Join the Savage Nation. Call now, 855-400-SAVAGE, 855-400-7282. Savage.
We're celebrating our veterans today, and a gentleman called out his dad, a great war hero, and he sent me a link, which we're putting up on michaelsavage.com. You know, it's worth reading something from the local newspaper about this amazing story. Over Frank Bud Dickman's antique desk in the living room of his East Louise house is a frame with his war medals. It's an ordinary-looking wooden frame, but if you take a closer look, it's not an ordinary frame. Inside it are air medals and the Distinguished Flying Cross, that's the DFC, with 4 oak leaf clusters he earned flying over Germany in B-17s during World War II. You want to listen to what it's like? All of you cry about being uncomfortable on campuses and being uncomfortable because someone said something to you, you worthless people, you. Here, this is the real world, the world that I hope you never have to face. And here is what he faced, a real man. I remember the morning that my bombing group got orders to bomb Germany, said Dickman, at then age 70, with the 94th Bomber Group attached to the 8th Air Force in England. On mission mornings, we would get up to the sounds of a GI truck coming around 4 a.m. and go to breakfast. Oh, I can't get up. I haven't taken my medication. Can I call a therapist? We were fed good because it was important to keep our strength up for 6 to 8 hour bombing raids. Uh-oh, call the ACLU. 6 to 8 hour bombing raid? That's against their rights. After breakfast, we would go to a 6 a.m. briefing. The doors would be closed because of secrecy. Then the officers would pull a canvas off the mission chart. Then we were told we were going over Berlin. You could hear a pin drop. By then, Lieutenant Dickman had flew many missions. He had become tough. He saw Americans collide head on. He would watch a buddy go down in flames. Atop his pilot's seat, he would watch bombers explode. We lost 8 B-17s that day trying to go over Berlin, said Dickman, who retired after 30 years with Southern Pacific. We had to fly 26,000 to 30,000 feet because of dense clouds. We had to eventually abort the mission, but some bomber formations weren't made aware of it, and they collided head-on with planes heading for home. Guess that didn't make it to your American hate history book, huh? Dickman said he broke out of formation for safety's sake. His flying fortress would fly home 50 feet over water so they wouldn't suffer the same fate. A lot of times we would return to an empty barrack, said Dickman, who flew 26 bombing missions overall. At times we were the only crew in the barrack. You become tough and calloused. I didn't let things like that bother me. I guess it was because we didn't get to see the blood. Well, there's more stories like that. And I ask you, can we ever win a war again with the sissies and the whiners that we have on colleges today? The half-baked human beings that are passing for victims. It's enough to make you puke. It's enough to make you puke when you look at the kids on campuses today screaming about garbage. Garbage because someone looked at them the wrong way. They call a lawyer. Or the illegal aliens. They want to break into my country and anyone who stands up to them is a racist, huh? That's because men like this are dead. That's because men like this are dead. He said air power helped defeat the tyrant Hitler. People today should be thankful we helped rid the earth of that tyrant. I don't want people to forget the great sacrifices these men made during World War II. They were some of the bravest men in history. Take a look at the writing, even of a small newspaper at that time in a local town in America compared to the junk that the journalists of today write. Take a look at that newspaper story. Brings Wounded Fortress back. If you expect me to talk about last night's debate, would you leave me alone already? Any one of them would be a better president than Hillary Clinton. Anybody on that stage would be better than that creature that we all know already who she is and what she did to us for 8 years. What is she, brand new? What, they just discover her? What, she cured polio somewhere I don't know about? Anybody on that stage, even the ice cream man, would be better than her. As far as the debate itself, let's face it, Cruz was the #1 winner. He was great. Rubio was not. They got Rubio. They're all behind him because he's the fall guy.